My name is Mary, and this video is intended to show you how to do the Crochet Provisional Cast-On for knitting. There are several different kinds of provisional cast-ons for knitting out there. I've used several of them and they all have their merits, but this is the one that I've been using a lot lately. Once I understood the concept, I haven't had to look it up again, which always has its benefits. Provisional cast-ons are for when you want to have live stitches on your cast-on edge. So normally when you cast on, you get a finished edge. But when you do a provisional cast on, you can knit into your stitches in one direction and then come back and have live stitches on that beginning edge and knit out in the other direction. I have used this in my Maribou shawl design, and I've used it in my Merrain MKAL shawl design. And I will link to both of those right below this video so you can see them. So to do this, you're going to need your knitting needles that you intend to use for your project. This is the yarn that I intend to use for the project. I don't really need it right now, so I'm going to set it to the side. You need a crochet hook, of course, and you need some waste yarn. Now this is what you're going to build your provisional cast on from. It doesn't really matter what size it is. You don't want it to be too drastically different from your yarn that you're going to work with, but it needs to be smooth because you're going to be ripping it out. So this is not the time to use that fancy mohair. So first thing I need to do before I show you this is to explain how to crochet. Now this is very basic 101 crochet. There's a million videos out there and I'm sure all of them are going to be better than this one. But just like with most fiber projects, you start with a slip knot. You take your crochet hook, you put it inside that loop, and you chain through it. So the way you do that is you go underneath, you sort of twist so that you grab the yarn with your hook, and you pull it through the loop, thus making a new loop. And you just do this over and over again. Now the crochet hook will determine how big these chain loops are, just like in knitting. I don't really concern myself so much with what size crochet needle I'm using for a provisional cast on, because again, it's going to be ripped out. Now you don't want it to be too crazy. You don't want a giant crochet hook and tiny yarn or vice versa, but you know, I don't stress about it too much. So that's how you do just a general crochet chain. Now, how do we apply this to the knitting provisional cast on with crochet hook? I'm going to rip this out, so I can start over. I only need one of these needles for right now, so I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to do my slip knot, and then put the crochet hook through the loop, just as we started before. But instead of just crocheting, I'm going to pick up this needle, and it's going to be a little awkward. You might feel like you need 7 more hands to do this, but you'll get the hang of it with practice. I'm going to put the yarn underneath the needle, and I'm going to crochet a single chain over the top of the needle. See what I mean about needing 7 extra hands? I'm going to crochet over the top of the needle. And the result is that I've got a loop on my crochet hook, but I also have a stitch on my knitting needle. Now, the next step is very important. The yarn right now is on top of the knitting needle. You want to just loop it around so that it's under the knitting needle. You're basically wrapping it around it. And you're going to do another crochet stitch. And not drop it. And this is what you just keep doing. You wrap around, you crochet a loop. You wrap around, you crochet a loop. That wrapping around is important because that's what gets it around your knitting needle. Now this is just for demonstration purposes. I don't have a set pattern in mind, so I'm not actually counting my stitches, but you're going to do this as many times as you need stitches on your needle for your provisional cast on. So you see here I've got a nice line of knitting stitches on my needle, and I've got one on my crochet hook. When you get to the end, when you've cast on as many as you need to, you're going to crochet just a little bit more and do a chain. You're not wrapping around the knitting needle this time. You're just giving yourself a sort of a tab to work with. 3 or 4 should be fine. And then on the last one, you're going to pull your working yarn through that big loop so that it won't unravel on you. You don't need to pull it terribly tight because you're going to want to unravel it later. So here I am. I've got all my stitches on my needle that I need, And now you're just ready to start knitting. Just act like these are your first stitches on your needle. Get your working yarn for your project and go to town. You will now have the stitches for your actual project on the needle, and right below will be that contrast smooth waste yarn provisional cast on. So there you go. In the next video, which I will also link below, I'm going to talk about how do you treat it on the other side. Once you've knit this out, how do you go back and pick up to do this side? This has been Mary, and this has been the Crochet Provisional Cast On for knitting. Thanks for joining me.